Hi guys, this is me, Teacher Fernando, and here I am back again. This time I'm going to read the fourth story on Dubliners, which is called Two Gallants. So let's get started. Here we go. Two Gallants. Two young men, Corley and Linehan, are short of money, but Corley has a way with women. Corley's latest girl is a servant in a big house, and the young men have plans for her. Can Corley persuade her to take something from the house? And can Linehan trust him? The great warm evening of August had descended on the city, and a warm air, a memory of summer, moved through the streets. With their shops closed for Sunday, the streets were filled with brightly colored crowds. The lamps shone down on the living pattern below, which, changing shape and color endlessly, sent up into the warm, grey evening air an unchanging, continual murmur. Two young men came down the hill of Rutland Square. One of them was just bringing a long speech to a close. The other, who walked on the edge of the pavement and was at times obliged to step onto the road because of his companion's rudeness, wore an amused, listening face. A sailing cap was pushed far back on his head, and the story that he was listening to made constant waves of expression break out over his face. From the corners of his nose and eyes and mouth, little bursts of chesty laughter followed one another out of his bent-over body. His eyes, shining with cunning enjoyment, glanced at every moment towards his companion's face. His trousers, his white rubber shoes, and the light jacket casually thrown over one shoulder all expressed youth. But there was a roll of fat around his waist. His hair was thin and grey, and his face had a ruined look. When he was quite sure the story had ended, he laughed noiselessly for fully half a minute. Then he said, "Well, that's the best I've ever heard. That really takes the biscuit." He became serious and silent when he had said this. His tongue was tired because he had been talking all the afternoon in a bar in Dorset Street. Most people thought Linehan was always looking for a free drink, but in spite of this reputation, his cleverness and good conversation usually ensured him a place among his friends. He had a brave manner of coming up to a party of them in a bar, and of holding himself ready on to the edge of the group until he was included in the next order of drinks. He was insensitive to every kind of rudeness. "And where did you pick her up, Corley?" he asked. Corley ran his tongue quickly along his upper lip. "One night, man," he said, "I was going along Thames Street, and I noticed a fine underwater house clock. I said, 'Good evening,' you know. So we went for a walk, and she told me she was a servant in a house in Baggot Street. I put my arm around her and kissed her a bit that night. Then, next Sunday, man, I met her by appointment. We went to Donnybrook, and I took her into a field there. It was fine, man. She'd bring me cigarettes every night, and I paid for the tram out and back. And one night she brought me 2 damn fine cigars. Maybe she thinks you'll marry her," said Linehan. "I told her I was out of a job," said Corley. "She doesn't know my name. I was too clever for that. But she thinks my family has money, you know." Linehan laughed again noiselessly. "Of all the good ones I ever heard," he said, "that really does take the biscuit." Corley's walk showed that he appreciated this remark. The swing of his muscular body forced his friend to jump lightly onto the road and back again to the pavement. Curly was the son of a police inspector, and he had inherited his father's powerful build and way of walking. He held his back very straight as he walked, moving his head from side to side. His head was large and oily, with a big round hat placed sideways on it. He always stared straight ahead, as if he were a marching soldier. He spoke without listening to the speech of his companions, and his conversation was mainly about himself. Linehan offered his friend a cigarette. As the two men walked on through the crowd, Curly occasionally turned to smile at the passing girls, but Linehan's eyes were fixed on the tear-rings around the large faint moon. He watched the passing of the grey shadows across its face. Finally, he said, "Well, tell me, Curly, I suppose you'll be able to pull it off all right, huh?" Curly closed one eye expressively as an answer. "Would she do it?" asked Linehan doubtfully. "You never can tell with women." "She's all right," said Curly. "I know how to persuade her, man. She's a bit fond of me." "You've really got away with women," said Linehan admiringly. Curly did not notice the amusement in his friend's voice. "There's nothing better than a good servant girl," said Curly. "Take my word for it." "From one who has tried them all," said Linehan. "First, I used to take girls out, you know," said Curly, "on the tram somewhere, or take them to a band or the theater, or buy them chocolates and sweets or something. I used to spend money on them, right enough." Linehan nodded seriously. "I know that game," he said, "and it's a fool's game." "And I never got any damn thing out of it," said Curly. "Same for me," said Linehan. "Only there was one of them." He ran his tongue along his upper lip again. The memory brightened his eyes. He too stared at the pale moon and seemed to be thinking deeply. "She was a bit of all right," he said regretfully. After a pause, he added, "She's with some other fellow now." "You broke her heart, I suppose," said Linehan knowingly. "Honest to God," said Curly, "she left me herself." Linehan shook his head and smiled, disbelieving. "You know you can't fool me, Curly. What woman has a chance with you?" As they passed by the railings of Trinity College, Linehan looked up at the clock. 20 past, he said. "Time enough," said Curly. "She'll be there all right. I always let her wait a bit." Linehan laughed quietly. "Damn it, Curly. You know how to treat them," he said. "I know all your little tricks," Curly confessed. "But tell me," said Linehan again, "are you sure you can pull it off? Women are damn difficult about this sort of thing." His bright, small eyes searched his companion's face. Curly swung his head from side to side as if to throw off an insistent insect, and he frowned. "I'll pull it off," he said. "Leave it to me. Can't you?" Linehan said no more. He did not wish to anger his friend. But Curly soon stopped frowning. His thoughts were running another way. "She's a damn fine girl. That's what she is," he said, appreciatively. They turned into Kildare Street. A harpist stood in the road playing to a little ring of listeners. He touched the strings carelessly, glancing from time to time at the face of each newcomer and entirely at the sky. The notes of the piece sounded deep and full in the evening air. The two men walked up the street without speaking, followed by the sorrowful music. At Stephen's Green, the noise of trams, the lights, and the crowd released them from their silence. "There she is," said Curly. At the corner of Hume Street, a young woman was standing. She wore a blue skirt with a jacket and a white sailor hat. "Let's have a look at her, Corley," said Lenihan. An unpleasant smile appeared on Corley's face. "What are you trying to do?" he asked sharply. "Damn it," said Lenihan. "I don't want an introduction. All I want is to have a look at her. I'm not going to eat her." "Oh, I'll look at her," said Corley in a friendlier way. "Well, I'll go over and talk to her, and you can pass by." "Right," said Lenihan. Corley had already started walking towards her when Lenihan called out, "And after? Where will we meet?" "Corner of Marion Street, 10:30, answered Corley. "Make sure you pull it off now," said Lenihan. Corley did not answer. He walked casually across the road, approached the young woman, and, without taking his hat off, began at once to talk to her. Once or twice she laughed and, with a knowing smile, bent her head towards him. Lenihan observed them for a few minutes. Then he crossed the road. As he approached Hunt Street corner, he found the air heavily perfumed, and his eyes made a rapid, anxious examination of the young woman's appearance. Her blue skirt was held at the waist by a belt of black leather, and a big bunch of red flowers was pinned to her chest. Lenihan noted approvingly her short, strong, muscular body. Good health shone in her fat, red face and in her confident blue eyes. She had a wide nose, an unpleasant smile, and two big front teeth. As he passed, Lenihan took off his cap, and Corley returned the greeting. Lenihan followed them, stepping lightly in his white shoes. As they walked down one side of Marion Square, when he had watched them climb the stairs of the Donnybrook tram, he turned and went back the way he had come. Now he was alone. His face looked older. His cheerfulness seemed to abandon him, and he let his hand run along the railings beside the pavement. The music which the harpist had played began to control his movements, his feet playing the tune and his fingers tapping out variations. He felt tired and bored. If he went to a bar, he knew he would have to talk a lot and amuse everyone, and his brain and throat were too dry for that. The problem of how he could pass the hours till he met Corley troubled him. He went on walking, and paused at last in front of a poor-looking cafe. After glancing cautiously up and down the street, he went in quickly. He was hungry because he had not eaten since breakfast. He sat down at an uncovered wooden table and asked the dirty serving girl to bring him a plate of hot cooked vegetables and a bottle of lemonade. He spoke to her roughly to cover up the gentlemanly impression he gave, because when he had come into the cafe, everyone had stopped talking. His face was heated. To appear natural, he pushed his cap back on his head and planted his elbows on the table. When his food came, he ate it greedily and found it so good that he made a mental note of the cafe. When he had finished his meal, he sat for some time thinking of Corley's adventure. In his imagination, he saw the pair of lovers walking along some dark road. He heard Corley's deep voice, gallantly and enthusiastically flirting with the young woman, and saw again her knowing smile. This vision made him powerfully aware of his own lack of money and spirit. He was tired of moving from place to place, of having to plot and lie and be cunning. He will be 31 in November. Will he never get a good job? Will he never have a home of his own? How pleasant it will be to have a warm fire to sit by and a good dinner to sit down to. Experience had made his heart bitter against the world, but all hope had not left him. He might still be able to live happily in some comfortable corner, if he could only find some good simple-minded girl with a little cash of her own. He paid the dirty serving girl and went out of the shop to begin his wandering again. When he saw by the clock of the College of Surgeons that it was exactly 10 o'clock, he hurried back to the corner of Merrion Street. There, he leaned against a lamppost and waited. He wondered if Corley had asked her yet, or if he would leave it until the last moment. He suffered all the anxiety and excitement of his friend's situation as well as his own, but the memory of Corley's confident walk calmed him. He was sure Corley would pull it off all right. All at once the idea came to him that perhaps Corley had deceived him and taken her home by another way. Would Corley do a thing like that? He lit his last cigarette and began to smoke it nervously, watching as each tram stopped at the far corner of the square. They must have gone home by another way. The paper of his cigarette broke, and he threw it into the road with a curse. Suddenly, he saw them coming towards him. He almost jumped with delight and tried to read the result in their walk. They were walking quickly. They did not seem to be speaking. He felt a sharp disappointment. He knew Corley would fail. They turned down Baggot Street, and he followed them. They talked for a few moments, and then the young woman went down the steps into the basement of a house, while Corley remained standing on the pavement. Some minutes passed. Then the front door was opened slowly and cautiously. A woman came running down the front steps and coughed. Corley went towards her. His large figure hid hers for a few seconds, and then she reappeared running up the steps. The door closed, and Corley began to walk away. Lenihan hurried in the same direction. Some drops of light rain fell. He took them as a warning and, glancing back towards the house to see that he was not observed, ran eagerly across the road. Corley turned to see who had called him and then continued walking. Lenihan ran after him. "Hello, Corley!" he cried again. He came level with his friend and looked keenly into his face. He could see nothing there. "Well," he said, "did you pull it off?" Still without answering, Corley went up a side street. His face was completely calm. Lenihan kept up with his friend, breathing uneasily. He was puzzled, and a threatening note came into his voice. "Can't you tell me?" he said. "Did you ask her?" Corley stopped at the first street lamp and stared tight-lipped in front of him. Then, with a deliberate movement, he put out a hand towards the light and, smiling, opened it slowly for his admiring follower to see. A small gold coin shone there. And that's the end of the story. Okay, guys, remember to just give me a thumbs up, write on the comments, and of course, please subscribe to my channel. This was Teacher Fernando. Take care and see you on the next video.